This is the first public event of Commissioner Gentiloni after the entry into service of the new commission, and it's a particular privilege to have him here because he will give us some insight about what is happening in the world arena, and he has been one of the protagonists of the international arena in the past years, so it's a unique chance to have him here. As I said, he was my minister when he was Minister of Foreign Affairs. Maybe he does not remember me because I was director for migration policies, and it was the years 2014, 2015, in which there was the first, not the first, but some of the biggest migration flows coming to Italy and to Europe. And we had very frequent meetings in the first floor of the Farnesina, which is a very imposing building, as some of you know, in which we said we were discussing how to tackle this issue, which was perceived by the public opinion as an invasion. But we knew it was not an invasion, no? In terms of numbers, in terms of social consequences, but still, what counts is the image. And so we had some interesting discussion that I still remember with pleasure. We are hosting him in this building, Palazzo Bontalenti, which is a historical building. It's a building of 22,000 square meters put at the disposal of the Institute. And we are very grateful for this move. Now we are occupying only 2,000 square meters, which is 10%. But in the end, it will be really something important also for the town of Florence. Yesterday, I was digging in the archive of the Institute, which are very efficient because we host also the historical archives of the European Union. Nobody knows it, but I mean, it's something that I try to recall always. And I found a letter dated 14 July 2017, in which the then Prime Minister of Italy, Paolo Gentiloni, was writing to the president of the Institute saying that Palazzo Bontalenti was given to the Institute. So thank you very much, because we owe this to Italy. We owe this to the mayor of Florence. Cristina knows it because, I mean, Mayor Nardella played a very substantial role. The Commission was also very instrumental, especially the then Secretary General Martel Selmayr. And so in the end, we have this building, which is very positive for us, for the Institute. And if I may say so, it's also very positive for the town of Florence. I mean, we are here in quite a dormant area of the town, and we will be filling this area with students, researchers, professors, also some bureaucrats. No? For example, there will be people like me, so our contribution is less important, but still, I will move also to Palazzo Bontalenti in a couple of months. So it's important for the town of Florence, and it will be filled with people studying international affairs and European affairs. The institute which is hosting us, the European University Institute, was founded in the 70s with the idea of contributing to the European spirit. The idea then was to complement the European integration, which was taking place in the 70s, mainly in economic terms, with something in the field of academia, of culture. And that's why the idea of a European university was launched. We do think that there is still a sense of having a European university. And there is a sense also for the town of Florence. So we would like to spread some of this European spirit also in the town of Florence. The local authorities, which are represented here, they are very much in agreement with this. And we want to break the image of an institute as being an ivory tower. And the fact that the room is full today is one of the examples. Possibly, I mean, when we have Paolo Gentiloni, it's quite easy to attract people, but the challenge will be to do it also in the future. This event was organized by his former head of cabinet, Marco Buti. So it's a kind of family reunion, no? Having the commissioner and his head of cabinet. And this is particularly interesting because when we tried to have Marco with us, and the negotiation with the then Commissioner Gentiloni to have him here was a very tough negotiation. But in the end, we succeeded. We are very proud to have Marco with us, together with Giancarlo Corsetti, who just arrived. I saw him somewhere. They are animating the Economic and Monetary Union Laboratory. We call it EMU Lab, which is a research center that studies the dynamics of the European integration in the field of monetary policy. So we are very pleased to have Paolo Gentiloni here, and let me give the floor to Marco Buti for an introduction more on an, let's say, academic level.
Okay, thank you very much, Marco. I mean, in these cases here, usually we say that our guest needs no introduction, and then the chair of the meeting goes on for 10 minutes explaining all what. So I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to use just a couple of minutes to situate a bit what we are doing today, this lecture, into what Marco mentioned, which is the EMU laboratory, so the EMU Lab. This is a new initiative we launched at the beginning of the year, essentially two chairs, Tommaso Padoa-Schioppa Chair, which is mine, and Giancarlo Corsetti, Professor Corsetti, who is here, the Pierre Werner Chair. The bet for this EMU Lab is to give a multidisciplinary approach and bring together actually the different souls of the EUI and the Robert Schuman Centre in particular, where the EMU Lab is sitting. So the economics, law, political science, history, the idea being that unless you have a comprehensive approach of this sort, we are not going to be able to understand where the European integration, economic, monetary, but also broader actually goes. So the idea is, it is not easy, I have to say, to bring together all these different disciplines with the aim of unlocking the EMU debate. And the aim is also, the goal is to publish towards the end of 2025 what we have dubbed the Florence Report on this. Now, the EMU Lab is up and running. We launched it officially with the inaugural lecture of Isabel Schnabel from the ECB last February, and I can announce already, so pencil it down in your notebook, that the annual lecture, the second annual lecture, will be given by Philippe Aghion, so leading economic thinker, on the 6th of March 2025, and with a catchy title, "Should We Fear Artificial Intelligence?" So this is and something closer to us, actually tomorrow, we are going to have a workshop on the Draghi report, so on investment. So if you EMU Lab investment, then you find it on the web. If you like to attend, you are most welcome. Now, this lecture here by Paolo Gentiloni, we thought about it as a reflection on the past 5 years. Actually, Paolo has just brought what he has published on his experience here, 5 years at the service of the European Union. And I think here the most relevant word, if I may say so, is crisis with an E. So it means multiple crises. And in part of this we have gone through together. I mean, we worked together, as Marco indicated, for 3.5 years. Actually, my intention was to go with Paolo and work and stay together for 12 months. And then comes COVID and the energy crisis, the war, and counting. So at the end of the day, it was 3.5 years before having the opportunity to stay here to join the EUI. But clearly reflecting on the past 5 years implies also to see a bit what is happening worldwide. And on the other side of the Atlantic, we are going to have quite momentous changes forthcoming actually in just a few weeks. Now, the European Union has in its DNA positive sum games. We integrate, we trade more together, and by and large we gain, all of us. We are not used to, it is not in our DNA, zero or negative sum games. And in the logical power that we have here in global governance, that's precisely what we have. So we will have to see how we can navigate the world in governance where the logical power prevails, and also with the novelty that actually the US doesn't come from Mars anymore. We continue to come from Venus. The US doesn't come from Mars anymore, it comes from Mercury. Mercurial. So God knows what is happening in the mind of Trump. So the element of unpredictability is going to be, I think, the name of the game in the future. So with these words, I'm honored and very glad to give the floor to Paolo Gentiloni for his lecture. He has accepted to take some questions also from the floor. We are going to do that, and then we conclude, and George Papakonstantinou, who is the director of the School of Transnational Governance, will say a few words at the end as a way of conclusion. So, Paolo, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Special thanks to the local authorities and to Marcos for their introduction, and particularly Marco for inviting me. We meet in times of very high uncertainty. Just think to what happened in recent weeks. Very tough situation in Georgia, unprecedented crisis in Romania, crazy crisis in South Korea, and then what happened in a couple of weeks, less than a couple of weeks, in Syria. And Syria is de facto connecting the two pre-existing wars, the war in Ukraine and the war in the Middle East, because Syria, for the forces that are involved, is a point of connection. So apparently this is a picture that is quite similar to what Pope Francis referred to 10 years ago, I think, when he mentioned the risk of being in a sort of a third world war in pieces, which, when was said by the Pope, appeared to be probably pessimistic. But if we look to what is around us, I think we all understand what was the meaning of this prophecy. 5 years ago, when I started my job as Commissioner for the Economy, apparently the situation was calmer. Our intention was to address what we call the low for long European economy difficulty, so long period of low Japanization of the European economy. And second, we were planning the European Green Deal as the main topic in the European agenda. This is what was characterizing our activity in December 2019, 5 years ago. Then there is a famous answer of a British Prime Minister maybe 70 years ago, Harold Macmillan. He was asked by a student about the priorities in government, and his famous answer was events, dear boy, events. And this indeed is what happened. Events were already happening when we were studying the Japanization of the European economy, and we were planning the European Green Deal. The virus, or maybe virus, we should say, was already spreading from China, but we didn't know it. The perception of the virus came for me, when I remember I was in Riyadh for a G20 finance ministers and central bank governors, when the Italian Prime Minister called the Italian finance minister and the Italian governor of the bank to inform them, consult them about the need to close a dozen of small and mid towns in the center north of Italy. And the day after, this was the main story in the first page of FT. And I remember very well the colleagues, finance ministers all over the world asking, what are you doing in Italy? The word lockdown was introduced at the time for the first time, and it appeared for a few days like a strange Italian decision. Then we all know that this crisis went through, and initially the European reaction was a negative one. We all remember the fact that in the first days, maybe also 1 or 2 weeks, we had closing of borders, prohibition of the exchange of face masks and medical equipments among European countries. You may remember also the Russian planes arriving in Italy from Russia with love, with medical equipments. So the European reaction was very controversial and weak in the first days, and maybe 1, 2 weeks. But gradually, and I think also thanks to the Commission, to the strength of the president of the Commission, who is, by the way, a medical doctor, so she was very involved in this, in the medical aspect of this issue. Things went gradually better, and gradually we had, I think, a European extraordinary reaction. Of course, on the health sector, I will not enter in this, but you remember very well that the decision to have a common procurement of vaccine was an historical decision. Just think what would have happened if every country would have asked or procured for their own vaccines, the better one, the worse one, the quantities. It would have been a real European catastrophe. So the common procurement was very important. And also this QR code, by the way, made by an Italian Director General of DG Connect, allowing to use the Green Pass for hundreds of millions. Not only the Europeans, but also others. Europeans used this QR code, from the Brits to the Swiss to others. These decisions were very important. But on the economy, please remember how fast was the initial reaction. 3 important decisions were taken after 8-9 days of the WHO declaration of the global pandemic. And this happened in 18 and 19 of March. And it was the decision of what we call the general escape clause, which is in substance the suspension of the fiscal rules that was in the treaties but was never used before. Second, a pandemic purchase program from the ECB. And third, a new framework for state aid, allowing European countries to spend and support sectors in a different way. So these initial decisions were extremely important to reassure markets, to keep things going, to allow governments to spend, and of course to open from the ECB a financial umbrella in relation to possible turbulence in financial markets. Then a little bit later, it was Holy Friday. By the way, exactly in the moment when the economic consequences of the pandemic were hitting their nadir, it was the level of economic activity at minus 20% in the EU, which is huge. And in that day, I'm particularly proud of this because this was our proposal. We approved a mechanism that, as you may know, is called SURE. Interesting to note that this mechanism, 100 billion only loans, was used by 19 countries. It contributed to support schemes like, in Italy we call it Cassa Integrazione, but there are many of these schemes in the different European countries. And 31.5 million jobs were maintained also because of the support of this 100 billion financing. And these member states that used it saved 9 billion because of the difference of the interest rates of the European Commission and the national interest rates. And Italy in particular saved a lot of billions through this mechanism. And de facto, it was the first breach in the wall of the so-called Eurobond. Of course, the second one was much bigger, more important because not only based on loans, but also on grants. But the first one was the SURE mechanism. Then the second one came, the bigger one. You may remember how long the discussion was. I remember very well when we, I think for the first time with a French colleague, we raised the issue, writing an op-ed in several European daily papers, asking for a fund of, I think the initial proposal was 1 trillion. Well, the reactions were from skeptical to critical. Also inside the Commission, we were not so much appreciated. Then there was an evolution. The Commission made a proposal, and France and Germany gave a green light to the proposal. And the definition of what happened, you may remember Olaf Scholz, who was at the time finance minister of Germany, referred to it as a Hamiltonian moment. We had the Copernican moment, we had the Rubiconian moment, a lot of of praise to these things, and then the national plans. Consequence of this, I will not re-enter in these details that you know very well. A consequence of this is that the European Commission is now one of the major player in euro-denominated bonds in financial markets. Just to give you an order of magnitude, the European Commission was normally raising something between 100 and 120 million per year in 2018, 2019. And since 2021, the European Commission is raising 1,000 times this, so around 110, 120 billion per year. Because through this mechanism of financing in the markets from the Commission, we supported, we supported Next Generation EU, and maybe less known, we supported also financial support to Ukraine, because financial support to Ukraine is mostly a Commission affair, not a national member states affair, most, not entirely. So this is just to give you and to share with you the historical, indeed, importance of this, of breaking this wall of the Eurobonds. I think that these decisions were crucial to avoid a wave of job losses, which would have been a problem, because in the American economy, you can have a wave of job losses, and then you have potentially 1 year, 2 years after a counter wave of employment. But this kind of disruption in the labor market is not European. And I think it was very important to keep jobs going, to avoid a wave of bankruptcies through these mechanisms that I briefly illustrated. And the result was, in 2022, the European economy growing by 3.4%, amazing number, also because 3.4% was higher than growth rate in 2022 of US and even China. I wouldn't have expected in my lifetime to see the European Union growing higher than China, but this is what happened in 2022. Well, of course, a second black swan was already in the way. So we celebrate the fact that 2022 was a year of extremely high growth for the EU, but at the same time, in February 24 of this same year, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia changed everything. And in my view, even with worse consequences than the pandemic, for the simple reason that the consequences of the pandemic were quite comparable among the different economic areas of the world. At least if we compare Europe, US, Japan, China, they were comparable. Not the same could be said of the consequences of the Russian invasion, because these consequences were, of course, geopolitically relevant for many other countries, but economically extremely stronger for Europe. Again, I think we had a strong reactions, unity among European countries, maybe with one outlier, but overall unity. Sanctions, this was not obvious. I was the Italian foreign minister after the annexation of Crimea, and I assure you that it was very different. It was difficult to reach consensus on very limited reaction to the annexation of Crimea. And I am sometimes wondering what would have happened if at the time our reaction would have been stronger. And I have to say that the one pushing not to have a so strong reaction were the big guys in the room. So among foreign ministers, myself, my friend Steinmeier, Laurent Fabius, and we were discussing with our Baltics or Polish or Eastern Europe colleagues that were not happy with the level of reaction that we had. But this is for history to decide. What is true for sure is that sanctions were very fast. The freeze of the Russian assets, of the Russian central bank assets, was decided after 5 days of the invasion. And I think that the Italian Prime Minister at the time, Mario Draghi, played a role in convincing the other partners for this decision. And then we can discuss for a lot of time on the are the sanctions working or not. My advice is to consider the fact on a midterm perspective, because sanctions are working. They are weakening the Russian economy. If you think that sanctions could kill the Russian economy and stop the war, I think this is not happening, but probably this is not what we could have asked to sanctions. By the way, we have an Italian experience maybe 90 years ago when there was the Italian war in Ethiopia. And also at the time, sanctions apparently were not so effective in stopping the Italian war in Ethiopia. But looking in the midterm perspective, probably also the weakness that Italy showed afterwards in the war was also created by the autarky and the reaction to sanctions in the 30s. Anyway, the reaction was strong. The adaptation of Next Generation EU was also, I think, impressive, because a program that was conceived before the Russian invasion was then adapted. You know that a new chapter was added called Repower EU, dedicated to energy and to the new crisis. But the impact, despite the good reaction, the impact was really hard. You may remember we had double-digit inflation. We had, and many of you in the room don't have an experience of high inflation because it was a long time that inflation was not there in Europe. We had a peak in energy prices, and we had public expenditure to moderate the social impact of inflation and high prices of energy. Anyway, in any case, if I go back to the 2023 discussions, we could also say that the more pessimistic scenarios did not materialize. So we were at the time referring to the risk of blackouts, energy, lack of energy storage too weak, how the winter temperature will be. And we were referring to recession. The fact is that we didn't have blackouts, and we had more something similar to stagnation than recession, with a different picture country by country, but overall, no recession. But the Russian invasion was a real turning point. Not only because it was, again, a big war in Europe. We had, of course, small wars in the Balkans, but this is another story. But because the invasion made clear the end of something that had been a sort of great European illusion. An illusion that came during the last decade of the previous century, the 90s, that I think we could describe as a sort of deuxième belle époque. We had a belle époque in the first decade of the previous century, but we had a belle époque also in the last decade, because we all remember the Berlin Wall falling, the reunification of Germany, the fall of the Soviet Union, 10 countries starting the process to enter the European Union, and then Fukuyama, and then, optimism, Wandel durch Handel, President Putin speaking in German in the Bundestag and receiving 3-4 minutes of applause, and then the G8. So this was a great period, from born in the last decade of the previous century, but with consequences going on also in the new century, despite 9/11, despite the great financial crisis, and in some countries of Europe, consequences going on. Just to remember you one single fact, the Nord Stream 2 project was finally abandoned only 2 days before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Because also 10 days before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the answer coming from the German authorities would have been, okay, this we will see, but this project is not dead. It died in February 22nd. Was this only a German illusion? No, I think it was a European illusion, of course, with mostly stronger in Germany, for sure. What happens now with the end of this great illusion, that we have the 3 pillars of the European model in the new century, all trembling in some way. So the cheap energy from fossil fuels, particularly from Russia, the unlimited trade potentiality in China, and the security granted by our American partners. These 3 pillars of the great illusion are trembling. And I think that the Russian invasion in Ukraine had consequences on all these 3 pillars and showed to the Europeans that this kind of model was now outdated. So we are now in a new era. And I think that the enormous progress made in Europe in the last 5 years, yes, of course, I'm also defending my personal activity. But I think, honestly, that we made enormous progress in the last 5 years, but these are insufficient miracles. So if we don't have new miracles, the previous miracles will prove to be completely insufficient, and probably they're already proving to be insufficient. So we need further miracles, and we need them now, not after the stabilizing of the French situation. Good luck, the stabilizing of the we will have a German government, yes, but we'll have it probably May, June of next year. We'll have a French stabilization, I don't know when. I hope soon. I hope tomorrow, but not easy, of course. So we can't wait. We know that the fragility. We address this new era with an economic outlook which is mostly confirming, we all say this, our forecast, but it is more or less true. I think we had a forecast from the European Commission for this year of growth around something less than 1%, so 0.8, 0.9. And the figures of the third quarter are confirming that we are going to have this kind of growth. So very limited growth, but not recession. We have declining inflation. We will reach next year the famous 2% target of the ECB. We have a quite strong labor market. 8 million new jobs created after the pandemic in Europe, and 750,000 new jobs in the first semester of this year in Europe. Wage growth catching up, at least partially, with inflation. Not so much in Italy, but all around in some countries. And public investment ratio growing. It was 3.2 in 2019. It is estimated to be 3.7 in 26, but it is already higher. So the process of declining of public investment that happened after the great financial crisis, public investment is not happening. The contrary is happening also because of Next Generation EU. But low growth is there. Consumption restarts is happening with a much slower pace that we were estimating a few months ago. And the level of savings of the families is still very, very high, especially in Germany, but also in Italy. So uncertainty is slowing down the restart of consumption, which is, of course, the trigger of higher growth, one of the main triggers of higher growth. And private investment is very weak. So we have this contradiction that public investment is rising, but private investment is low. And this brings to all the discussion that you well know about capital markets union, etc. And we have a problem with industry, within industrial production, which is, of course, exceptionally a German and Italian problem. Italy and Germany industrial production are down in recent quarters by 4%, 4-something percent, which is more than double of the EU average. And well, I think it would be very long to discuss the reason. We can do, if there are questions on this, some. So low growth, despite Next Generation EU. We don't have a counterfactual analysis. What would have happened without Next Generation EU? What we can say is that Next Generation EU, in any case, changed the growth map in Europe. You may remember that we had a very bad acronym used maybe 10 years ago, which was referred to Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. These pigs, or many of these pigs, are flying now in terms of growth, and they are going much, much better than Finland or Sweden or Austria or other countries. And this is partly also, there are many other things, energy, of course, but this is partially also because of Next Generation EU. We will see the last 2 years of the program that will be crucial, especially for countries as our country, where, we are okay with the timeline of the Commission, but we pushed towards the end of Next Generation EU, many of the milestones and programs and investments. So the last 2 years will be crucial. The challenge is now to conclude. Of course, the challenge is, we discussed a lot, thanks to 2 Italian former prime ministers, of our economic challenges. As you know, the Letta report is more concentrated on the task to complete the single market. There are sectors where the single market is not a single market. And to complete it, in the Letta report, there is also resurfacing the idea to build some sort of 28 member state to have common practices. This is the Letta report, and then the Draghi report. Main target: reduce the gap on technological innovation, try to combine decarbonization and competitiveness, and try to combine national and EU level funding, industrial policies, etc. Very interesting, I think, to read. Interesting that President von der Leyen is trying to do something about this. They are also building a new directorate of the Commission, which in the Commission behavior means you are serious, dealing with the Draghi report. Good luck for them, but this is an interesting commitment from President von der Leyen. Then, to conclude, in this challenging scenario, President Trump was re-elected in this challenging scenario for Europe. Is it a further threat for Europe, for the European Union? Of course, you can argue this. I prefer to be on the optimistic side and argue that this could be a wake-up call for Europe, in need of wake-up calls. The fact is that the European Union has never been so fragile, but also never been so necessary. This is the contradiction. And I think that this contradiction is very clearly there. Never so necessary for Europeans and for the world to have a strong European Union. Of course, the Trump administration could move on tariffs. The move could happen. It is not clear. So it's to make prevision is rather, could be interesting, but I have no idea. Could be towards China. If there are substantial tariffs towards China, there is a substantial risk of rerouting of Chinese overproduction towards Europe. So those that are crying against the Chinese invasion should be aware of the fact that if there are substantial tariffs from US towards China, the rerouting is probable. On EU, I really don't know. My experience with President Trump is that he is a negotiator. And so my guess is that he could use the tool of tariffs with Europeans, as I think he is doing with Mexico and Canada, more as a negotiating tool than as a trigger of a trade war. Because if this second is the case, the risks for America are huge. Risk of inflation and risks of disrupting the economic cooperation between Europe and US in the very moment when you ask to have a common front towards China. So we will see. Something is sure, that Trump will mean less commitment on multilateral order. This is granted. In the first term, President Trump abandoned WHO, de facto WTO, abandoned the Paris Agreement, and made some references to the American commitment in Europe that you may have seen also in a recent interview to ABC a few days ago about NATO. Less commitment on multilateral order and less leadership on values. So this is why I refer to the importance of the EU power and global role. Because what else can be done if there is not a stronger Europe in terms of the multilateral order that we need and in terms of the value competition that is there between autocracies and democracies in the world? I'm not saying that the Americans will leave this camp. I'm saying that they will slow down their commitment, both on the multilateral order and on the value competition. So I think we need an ambitious European Union and an ambitious new European Commission. Good example, in my view, von der Leyen signing Mercosur despite some strong opposition. Mercosur is geopolitical. Don't refer only to what happens to this cheese or this beef, and nothing tremendous will happen. And especially for a country like Italy, an export-oriented country, a lot of good things will happen. But in any case, to have this area of 750 million people is geopolitically extraordinary. So very good, in my view, that von der Leyen accepted to go ahead. A test of this ambition will be a single issue, which is, will we have Eurobond for common defense? Apparently it's a small thing, but it is for sure the door that you can open to continue to use this financial tool. Why? Because, as you know, several European countries that normally are against Eurobonds are making exceptions on Eurobonds for common defense. For example, the Danish Prime Minister 1 week ago made an interview saying, in this case, we are in favor, which from Denmark is really exceptional. And the same is from the Baltics, the other Scandinavian. Of course, there is a big question mark about Germany. But I think that to be bold on this is absolutely essential now, not only for the financial aspect, of course, financial aspect that we need to continue on the Eurobonds experiments, but it is important for geopolitical reasons. Obviously, we'll see. If I have to make it very short, I'm more concerned about what can President Trump decide on Ukraine than on what President Trump can decide on tariffs. But maybe I'm wrong. We will see. But of course, for us, Europeans, how the war and the Russian invasion will be concluded will be crucial for the 15, 20 years to come. So if there is a bad conclusion, you design a line, Korean style, without clarifying who is protecting this division. Many bad conclusions are possible. If you have a bad conclusion, you will have tensions and instability and risks to peace in Europe in the next 20 years, and probably also involving countries, well, I don't want to speculate. So my conclusion is that all of this is putting a lot of responsibility, because the weakness of governments is putting a lot of responsibility in the European Commission. I think the Commission should take the responsibility in its own shoulders and be ambitious. And we all should be always aware of the fact that we are so lucky to be Europeans. We are not always reflecting on this, how lucky we are to be in an area of 450 million people with 9, 10 countries asking to enter, where there is freedom, the rule of law, the welfare state. Of course, all of this is relative. No, we are fighting because the healthcare system in Italy is not working, and rightly so. But we have, in any case, universal services, which is Europe, and freedom, and longevity, which for some of us is also important, and openness to trade, and a little bit less social differences than in China or in America. So this is an extraordinary advantage in this uncertain world, and so we need to unite and to run fast. Thank you.